I'm Micah Schweitzer from WNIN Public Radio. It's my pleasure to be the moderator of this event. And I want to take just a couple of moments for some housekeeping before we start. Our sponsors, of course, without whom we would not be here, are the Evansville Teachers Association, United Neighborhoods of Evansville, the League of Women Voters of Southwest Indiana, Valley Watch, the Teamsters Local 215, the Evansville Vanderburgh Public Library, the Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 136, and the Isaac Walton League. So a big thanks to all of them for sponsoring this. I also want to take just a moment to thank the legislators for being here month after month. Any of us who think that we have a busy life probably don't know quite what that means without being a legislator. And so thank you to all of you for being here and for being open to questions. We've had a letter from one of our regulars who is concerned about the booing that sometimes occurs when folks in the audience disagree with the question. And so I'm sure none of you will do that today, but it has happened in the past. And we do want to make sure that we are respectful of whatever views and whatever questions are being posed by you, the public, at the microphone. And so if you do not support what the person is saying, there's no need to vocally let them know. You can simply let your silence speak for your disapproval. Our favorite number at Meet Your Legislators is 2, because you have 2 minutes to ask your question at the microphone, and each legislator has 2 minutes to respond. And we'll get started with opening remarks from the legislators, and those will be 2 minutes as well. And do we want to start on a particular end of the table? Okay, let's go with our representatives first this time.
Oops. Representatives are always first. Anyway, thank you all for being here on such a pretty spring morning, almost spring morning. I apologize, I'm going to have to leave a little early, but I'm glad to be here and appreciate you all being here. One of the issues that has come over from the Senate, because that's what we've just gone through, kind of a halftime session where the House bills go to the Senate and the Senate bills go to the House. And one of the bills that has come over from the Senate is a riverboat gaming bill. And several of us met with the Speaker of the House because our concern is what it does to local units of government. It is intention of that bill, I believe, is to try to make our casinos and our gaming institutions more competitive with other states, because now we've got Illinois, we're going to have Kentucky, we've got Ohio, and so gaming revenue is, I believe, the third or fourth largest revenue to the state of Indiana. So the intention of the bill is to make us a little more competitive and to give our gaming institutions some advantages. The negative is that it's going to impact our local units of government, our cities and our counties. And here we're very, very unique in that the city of Evansville and Vanderburgh County use their gaming revenue for capital improvement projects. So our government doesn't depend on gaming revenue for its operations, but that's not the case elsewhere in Indiana. And one of the things that I'm very concerned about, as is the Speaker, is expanding gambling. The expansion of gambling is something that concerns many of us in the state legislature, because many of us believe there's enough opportunities for gaming and for gambling in the state already. So that's an issue that we'll be keeping very close tabs on, and it directly affects the city of Evansville and Vanderburgh County. And again, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Take somebody with muscles. Okay. Good morning and welcome to all the students in the crowd. Thank you for attending. Woo woo. All right. Like she said, it's halftime, or we just finished halftime. We're starting the third quarter, I guess, to use an analogy their way, since USI's in the GLVC tournament going on here. This is an opportunity to learn a lot about what bills that have passed the Senate are over in the House, and look at some of the issues that might have gone from one house to the other, and tweak the language, or in some cases, some bills like the one she just referred to, which is a major concern to us down here. We're trying to, as a Southern Indiana delegation, figure out, how we look at the revenues that are used from the gambling boat. And I got a letter from our commissioners in Posey County yesterday, and they use that money for our sheriff's pensions. And, in Evansville, they use them for the welfare to work programs. So a lot of those revenues are being used on very important issues in our communities, and we want to make sure we keep track of those things and do what's important for our communities. As always, I would encourage folks to continue to contact us and keep track of those bills that are of interest to you and those issues that are a concern to you. Let us know early and often about what those concerns might be. And we've got basically a startup again, and if your bill that you've been tracking or paying attention to has gone from one house to another, although it might be in the other house, it might be in the Senate in our case, don't hesitate to contact us and let us know that you still have concerns or issues or changes. I got a phone call yesterday from another legislator who had been contacted by another legislator to ask me to put an amendment on a bill that's in my committee on Tuesday because I sit on the committee. So things happen that way. So make sure that you participate. Again, welcome to everyone here, and especially those that are earning credit for it. So have a great day.
Good morning. I'm Tom Washburn. I represent District 64, which is kind of the north part of Vandenberg County and points north all the way up to Vincennes. As I said, this is the time when the bills are coming both ways, which makes for a rather boring week, to tell you the truth, this past week for me anyways. And we did have some interesting meetings on some things, but I got up at the normal 4:30 in the morning to go up and look at about a 55-page bill that changed some ofs to something else, and it was a grammar correction bill for the Indiana Code, and you talk about a boring piece of work, boy. But to me, the highlight of this past week was on one of those nights, I don't remember which one it was now, the Legislative Black Caucus held their annual party. And I have never heard a better Motown band than they had. And the barbecue was superb. It was the best event of the year by far. And Pat Bauer won a dance contest, a former Speaker of the House, and that was something to behold as well. So at the beginning of the session, when the House is first beginning to hear bills, the bills are the non-controversial agency bills, typically extremely necessary but extremely boring. And I'm finding here in my first term that when you begin to hear the Senate bills, the first ones coming through are just not that interesting. I mean, they're necessary, but they're just not that interesting. But I think that's going to change very, very rapidly. So appreciate you being here and giving us some input as we head back into the final push here to get the cycle done by April 29th. Thank you.
Good morning as well, and welcome to the students. It's great to see you here. I had a special opportunity yesterday to be at the table with Representative Washburn on the WNIN, so catch it, because we had some fun. We have some differing opinions, and it was fun to have a little exchange back and forth. Right? Yeah. Okay. It was good, let me tell you. I also want to give a congratulations. I'm sure that Senator Becker will to one of our very precious friends here in Evansville. But we had the Torchbearer Awards from the Commission on Women, and if any of you remember some of the teachers in the audience, Jenny O'Connor, who worked with the school corporation and was instrumental in starting this very valuable, it was the rolling dental, it was a lab that went around to all the children. I think now it's fixed. I think it's a fixed location, but it served over 4,000 children this last year, and these are children who would not have the dental care, and it means so much. And she won one award, and I know that Senator Becker will talk about another award. It's interesting now, as he talked about, we're seeing some comparison bills coming back and forth from the Senate. One of the things that I wanted to bring out was that we're seeing also where local units of government are trying to make up the loss in revenue from the cabs. We have to be very careful. We had a bill that came through that was going to, it was from the northern Indiana, that basically was going to make apartment owners pay exorbitant fees for registering their apartments. They went from $100 to $200 a unit. And this, although the idea was to protect the people who are there with safety reasons, that was an exorbitant way to actually just pad your local general budget. We did have another one, though, that does concern me that did pass through, and that's one where it's at 1145, where there's a $3 charge now on top of the charges that the credit cards give you. It can be up to $3 for processing your credit card if you pay your utility bills with your credit card, and I don't like that. I think that if we're going to have a processing fee, $3 on top of what the credit card company is going to charge you is exorbitant. It's another way that local governments are trying to bring in money. I've got some information out there on the testing bill that's up before us, the drug testing. Like for you to look at it, give me some calls with your comments. And as well, I put on the board the last final structure of the Child Fatality Review Committee, which incorporates and expands the opportunities to learn about more about our children in the state of Indiana, and better strategize for the improvement.
Good morning. Appreciate all of you being here. I want to start off first by sharing with you the other person that received a Torchbearer Award from the Indiana Commission for Women. And these women are nominated on a statewide basis, and they cannot be nominated by us as members. Gail and I are both members of the Indiana Commission for Women, but we are not allowed to nominate either. They have to be nominated by organizations within their community. And the other person that received the Torchbearer Award was Roberta Hyman. And Roberta's right back there serving coffee, so let's give her a round of applause. It was a nice event, and we were glad to have both Jenny O'Connor as well as Roberta receive these awards. And we don't have any input into the awards as well. There's a separate committee that looks at all the nominations on a statewide basis, but we very much appreciate. The one thing that we have been very vigilant about is just encouraging people. We know we have terrific women in Southwest Indiana, and so we have encouraged groups and organizations to nominate, because sometimes if you don't know about it, nobody makes a nomination. So we're very proud. I wanted just to share with you a little bit of information. You know, a lot of times we think that the majority of bills are partisan, and I guess it's not. Really, things have improved this year, in particular in the House. But in the Senate, there were 619 bills introduced, filed by 50 senators at the beginning of the session. And there were 213 bills out of the 619 that passed. So that tells you about a third. Typically, it's only about 20%, but that's a little bit high. But out of the percentage of bills, 98% of the bills passed with bipartisan support. 98%. 208 out of 213 bills that were voted on were passed with bipartisan support. And in addition to that, 51% passed unanimously, with all of us voting the same way. So you can see that there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of cooperation, and I think it's particularly true in the Senate. We're more policy driven. Maybe it's because we only run every 4 years versus every 2 years, but I'm very pleased about that. I've probably taken my time, so I just wanted to share that information. Be happy to have your questions later.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm fighting with the cold, so I ask you to bear with me, please. We did pass several significant bills in the last couple of weeks out of the Senate. One of them was the bill it's a resolution about the Constitutional Convention, and there may be some questions here today if you guys want to ask about that. I'd be happy to elaborate more. The drone legislation that I introduced, this was coming to my attention last summer. When I first talked about it, it seemed like some people thought it was comical, it was frivolous. But if you've been following the news now, you see that nobody's laughing about it anymore. You've seen the federal government, you've seen Rand Paul filibustered yesterday after reports come out where the federal government's willing to use drones on civilians up to and killing civilians on civilian soil. So I'm really pleased to see that now the Senate has come on board with me. I've had a lot of senators who have signed on to this legislation. We've got a summer study set up for this. Hopefully we'll get one. But I want to share with you one thing here that I got. It was a release about in regards to the sequestration that's going on. This is from Governor Pence's office. State agencies are making every effort to absorb the cuts administratively wherever possible to minimize the impact on programs and services. The sequestration will eliminate $4.1 million in food funds from the state's Women, Infants, and Children Program, WIC. Due to Indiana's low transportation costs, administrative cuts of $1.6 million, and a declining WIC caseload, Indiana will continue to provide full benefits to all recipients. The Department of Workforce Development, DWD, will see funding for job seekers services reduced by $1.1 million and GED remediation cut by $515,000. DWD will mitigate that impact by these cuts completely with a discontinued or discounted contract extension and a performance-based funding model. The Department of Labor will lose some federal matching dollars for the Indiana Occupational Safety and Health Administration and InSafe, but can minimize the cuts with other funding sources. In addition, DOL is implementing new technologies later this year to increase efficiency and minimize personnel redundancy. The department expects significant cost savings that will mitigate any effects of sequestration. Cuts to federal unemployment benefits cannot be mitigated by the state. Per instruction from the U.S. Department of Labor on Friday, March 1st, EUC benefits to 33,000 Hoosiers will be reduced by 10.7% beginning March 31st. The Indiana National Guard will put 1,000 Army and Air National Guard full-time military technicians into unpaid furlough 1 day a week from the end of April through September. The Guard will hold off on awarding $30 million in military construction projects at Terre Haute and South Bend for fiscal year 2013. The Guard will implement changes to training methods and will stagger furloughs to reduce training costs and ensure that mission requirements are still met. And so I just want to share with you guys some of the things that we can expect to see here in the coming weeks. I think it was important to let you know that there are some changes coming about because of this federal government's cutting the funding. There is more, but I'll share it with you later.
Thank you. Okay, your turn now. So let's start with school vouchers, and this is a question from Bob Wessel.
My name is Bob Wessel, and I taught here in the local school corporation for almost 40 years. And I'm very concerned. I know it's already a fact, but I'm very concerned about the vouchers. I think the voucher system in Indiana and the other states where it exists has been a ruse. It's been a red herring, because the reasons that have been stated by those who supported this voucher system aren't true. I don't think, I know that there are two basic reasons that this voucher system's been passed. One is to fund public money to church schools, and the other one is as a basis for the coming takeover by, and this will take a while, I think, until people wise up and know what's going on. And the second reason is it becomes a basis for private takeover of public property. And this is wrong. It's totally wrong. We see all around the country, various states, most controlled by the Republican Party, that have gone to these voucher systems. And so I'd like to know who and when you're going to repeal this bill.
Okay, anyone planning on repealing the voucher bill?
But I'll take
ahead, yeah.
You know, I appreciate your concern, and you know, we could have a debate about the propriety of school vouchers and the overall effect on public education in a philosophical sense, but in a practical, real-world sense, this is crazy. This is nonsense. It is a red herring, but not for the reasons you think. It's a red herring because we have 1.1 million school students in Indiana. We have 7,500 on vouchers. It is an insignificant number of people on vouchers. We can't even get them to take the full number of vouchers that have been offered. Why? Because our public schools are really good. And kids are not sitting there throbbing at the bit, or whatever you want to call it, to jump out of our public schools. They're just not. These vouchers are intended for some really tragic situations, and those kids who are in some really tragic situations are taking advantage of them. And that's the truth. It's not, we spend about $3 billion on education, K-12, and we're spending about $47 million on vouchers. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it's not. Let me give you some, Representative Bacon ran the numbers for his district, and I don't have mine for 64. He had like 13 kids on vouchers out of 13,000 kids. It's just this, you got more kids moving in and out of the district, crossing districts, than you have otherwise. And I'm not, we could have the philosophical debate. I mean, the Supreme Court has said they're constitutional. That's already been litigated all the way through. If the parents are deciding where it's going, it's constitutional. And the Indiana Constitution has said that by any suitable means you can promote education by any suitable means. So it's constitutional. But I do understand that there's another side, and it would be a really interesting debate, but it would take the entire 2 hours to have it. But from a practical perspective, these voucher programs are not derailing public education in Indiana. So I don't see it being repealed. I just see some real tragic situations, pretty much in Indianapolis and Gary, where this is going to help some families of limited means get out of some really horrid situations for their kid. And things have to really break down for someone to do this. I mean, these are tough situations that these vouchers are being applied to. Yeah.
Thank you. I believe that parents have choices when it comes to their children, and as Representative Washburn pointed out, because our public schools are so good and the education system is so good, very few parents are making those choices for their children. But I also want to correct, this is not a Republican initiative. This has been pushed by Republicans and Democrats all over the country. President Obama and his education secretary advocates for vouchers and charter schools. So it's not a partisan issue. It's a bipartisan issue. And it is very much a philosophical issue, but I just wanted to point that out and share that with you. Thank you.
A little bit from the other side. I guess in the state of Indiana, it probably is a little more partisan, because what we have seen is that the whole shifting of monies has occurred, and it has occurred along with this thing called vouchers. But what has happened is that we're funding our school system now, I think, to the tune of the 2009 level, but we're funding 3 systems now. We're funding our traditional public schools, we're funding the charter schools, and we're funding parochial schools, all with vouchers. And it is true, up until this point, they haven't been used effectively, but there have been opportunities for change to expand it, where you would have somebody making, I think it's $150,000 a year for the family that would be able to take advantage of the vouchers. So eventually it will be just another opportunity to support schools that probably are not the public schools. And I just don't know if we can afford it. I think we have to get back to the reality of what people can afford here in the state of Indiana. And I don't think we can afford 3 systems. We do have a luxury in the school system we are in. There is choice if there are openings in schools and parents take advantage of it. I think we also, we really do have a good school system here, and that's where it's very hard to accept some of these changes. I hope that we never get in a position where there's a takeover. I know what you're talking. There is a process by which schools can become privately organized, and that is a very serious concern and should be for all of us. I hope that we don't see that in any of our schools here in the school system.
Thank you, Bob, for bringing that issue up. I have never been a voucher proponent because I really believe in public education. I think it's critical for democracy, and I didn't support it, and I won't be supporting it again. And the reason being is that we have already cut public schools by $300 million, And we're just now starting to get some of that money back to schools. Now, if I would support vouchers and charters if they all had to take every child that came to their school, but they don't. Unlike public schools, they can pick and choose, and they can take you for a semester and take your money, take that voucher money, and at the end of that semester, they can send you back to the public school. And many of them are doing just that. And so that's why if they had to live by the same rules and regulations as the public schools have to, and if they had to take every child, if they had to take every special ed child that applied, every low-income child that applied, some of our charter schools don't even offer transportation, so a lot of those children cannot go there. They are not options for everybody, and it is. If you look at the companies that poured millions of dollars into some of these campaigns over the last several years, they're out-of-state companies that want to put a foothold. They want to take over public schools to take the profits out of public schools, and that's really what this is about. I think Tony Bennett was defeated not because Glenda Ritz and teachers supported Glenda Ritz. I mean, there's only 45,000 teachers statewide. It was because the public really was concerned and did not appreciate his takeover of public schools. He initiated that. There was a bill, in fact, that just was defeated in the House that had all those provisions to take over public schools. And I think we're going down the wrong path, and I think Tony Bennett was defeated by a lot of Republicans as well as Democrats. In fact, Glenda Ritz received more votes in this last campaign than our governor received on a statewide basis. And that ought to tell people something right there.
Yeah, Bob, I didn't support the voucher program either, and I had my reasons. And we've talked about this so many times at these meetings and other legislative meetings I've had, but there was a couple of things that bothered me about it. I know the talk at the whole time was about we want to improve public schools, and I didn't see how this was the answer. If you're going to purge the school of the students, how that was going to improve that school. And I know across the state there are some school corporations and districts that are failing bad, miserably. And I understand parents that have their children in schools, but there's nothing prohibiting them from pulling a kid out of that school anyway. I think here we're very fortunate because we have a good school districts in this area, all in the southern part of the state of Indiana. But my concern was that I didn't think it was fair for people that are paying top dollar to put their kids in these private schools that someone else can take their child out of a public school and have that funding follow that kid into that private school. I think that parent that's paying to put their child in a private school is going to see that as a subsidy, that their tax money is subsidizing this other child to come into that private school as well. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair to people to be treated like that. And the other one is that inevitably, since we're in such a world of litigation, I think it's just going to be a matter of time before somebody will challenge that state money going into these private schools and religion being taught. I just see it creating a hardship somewhere down the road. I may be wrong. This thing's new yet. It's got a ways to go yet before it really proves itself out. But I did get some emails in the height of all of the discussion and debate on that voucher program to that point, was that I want that voucher program. I just don't want my kid to have that religious stuff. I had emails like that. So I don't like to delve into something that's going to create us more problems than it's going to fix. And that's what I see in here with the voucher program. So I just want to let you know that's some of the reasons why I voted against it.
Thank you. Okay. It's always fun to see that there are more than two sides to many issues. Let's move on to a question about the Artisans Distiller Bill, and this is from Dwayne Kuhlenschmidt.
Hi, I'm Dwayne Kuhlenschmidt. I'm glad to see that our representatives have a surgeon's idea of 2 minutes. So usually I have a little more captive audience than this. The Artisans Distillers Bill, as it came out of the House this year, was the child of a bill, I think it was House Bill 1227, that originated a year ago. Artisan distilling is a move in the United States. It's a flowing tide. 10 years ago, there were 50 distilleries in the country. Now there are 500. As a farm family in Indiana, we would like to take advantage of this tide. We have begun establishing a venue for distilling. When the bill went into the House this year, it made it possible to have point of production sales and almost an agro-tourism type situation. As it came out of the Public Policy Committee, it now limits it to people who already have distillers licenses or winery licenses or brewery licenses. For the farmers, that's bad. I mean, we have, I think, about 50 or 60 breweries in the state, about that many wineries, 5 distillers. We've got a whole bunch of farmers. Farmers can do a lot of things. They're all welders. They all know chemicals. This is an output or an outlet for them to turn their $5, $6 a bushel corn into $50 a bushel corn, for them to pick up that income at production. It's true. Anyway, I would like to ask you, Senator, as a member of the Agricultural Committee, to consider posting an amendment on this to eliminate the 3-year wait time for this, so that those of us in the farming community can get on with what we're doing. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Dwayne. I guess that I haven't seen a schedule for this week coming. Normally our ag committees are on Mondays, and I haven't seen the schedule yet. But this is the House version that.
This is the House version that you have.
Mm-hmm.
It will go to the Senate Public Policy. I think Senator Alton's committee on Wednesday.
Okay. And you're asking to eliminate the licensing?
No,
or just
at the present time, anyone who has not used the microphone. Sure.
Don't get off that easy.
At the present time, unless you currently hold one of these 3 types of licenses or permits in the state of Indiana, you will have to obtain one of the permits and wait 3 years before you can have point of production sales. Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at that. One of the things that bothers me about government is the restrictions we put on businesses and regulations. And this is, I had a situation a couple weeks ago here with a small businessman in town where the environmental management had come in and caused this businessman some grief. And I got that squared away, and they changed their tune, but I understand what you're talking about here. I'd like to see us back off a little bit. One of the things we have in our country anymore is, there used to be a time when an entrepreneur could start a business and get going without a wall of regulations and rules and possible fines and fees. And maybe if this is one of those steps to roll that back, I'd be happy to participate in that. I did meet with Governor Pence this week about that subject matter, so
Okay.
Be glad to look at this and see if we can help you on it.
Ma'am.
Well, the question I had was, have you talked to the Farm Bureau? Is the Farm Bureau supportive of this amendment?
The Farm Bureau originally supported the amendment. I've tried, this came out and was brought to my attention Thursday. The original bill, as it had gone in, did not contain the 3-year provision.
Okay.
The Farm Bureau was supportive of it, spoke in glowing terms thereof at the hearings in the Public Policy Committee. I've attempted to contact our local Farm Bureau representatives and have been unable to get an answer from them.
Okay. Well, I do serve on the Public Policy Committee, and we'll certainly bring this to Senator Alting. He's the chairman of
Yes,
the
ma'am.
committee. Because having just come from the House, I don't really have any information on the bill except what you've given me so far. We just started the second half, so I'll take a look
All
at
true, all true. Nothing, not slanted in the least, the information I gave you.
that. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Am I on?
Not now.
Here, okay. In the bill, did it also change the production, the
Production.
volume?
Yes, ma'am. Production levels changed from 40,000 gallons, and that is point of sale, or that is point of production sale. So that means it would be, run the math, about 20,000 cases of liquor to 10,000. And most of the people that I have spoken with that are in the artisan distilling mode have not objected to that. It is the idea of the 3-year wait. If you are in production now, this will be wonderful for you because you'll suddenly have, instead of a brew pub, a booze pub.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are building your business or currently not in production, you will have to sit on the sidelines for 3 years before you can get local exposure.
I remember when it came through. I don't serve on that committee,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a lot of interest in the bill, and I feel that there's a lot of worth in growing that business. I saw a CD. I had a CD that was given to me a couple of weeks ago. It was great on the growth of this business in Southern Indiana. So I wish you good luck.
Thank
Good
you.
bill.
I thought Gail was going to allude to it. There was a great deal of debate on the House floor about the 3-year waiting period. And Tom and I are trying to remember if there was an amendment on the House floor, whether or not, if they were to take it out or not, or if a lot of that occurred on third. And we can't remember what actually occurred. It was in the original bill that was introduced and as we're looking at it. So it came as a part of the bill this year. But you know, if Jim's willing to look at and try to figure out how to take that out of there, I would recommend that pathway taking place in the Senate, because a great deal of debate did occur on the House floor on that particular issue, and it didn't go through unnoticed. So,
All right.
You didn't bring samples, did you?
No, the feds regulate that fairly tightly. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Question now about Senate Bill 335, insurance coverage for women, and that's Anita Ozette.
I'm not as tall. Good morning, my name is Anita Ozette, and I would like to say that despite the fact that my husband and I have been married for just shy of 45 years to each other, that if either one of us wants to have the other be able to talk to our physician about one another or allow our adult children to do that, we have to actually write down those names and sign that we're giving them permission, because we tend to value, all of us tend to value as Americans, our privacy. And yet, privacy seems to fly the coop in many respects lately in the Indiana bills that are on the House and Senate. Right now, in those two chambers, there are no fewer than 13 bills that would like to take away my rights to privacy. One of those bills, especially for women's privacy, women's right to privacy, one of those bills is the Senate Bill 0335. And that one addresses insurance and employers being able to deny in their coverage what I can have access to that they normally for many years have given me access to. And I recognize that some people don't like contraception and don't like sterilization. However, there are many people who, in a tubal ligation, for example, it's a health issue. Contraception, those pills, they're a health issue. Women who take those things and do those things have a far less chance of getting gynecological cancers. So let's just, for a second, pretend that it wasn't my issues. And by the way, sterilization does include vasectomies, so I would hope that that applies then to men as well as to women, or we're going to just pick out on discriminate against one group. But let's just pretend that instead of women's health issues, that an employer objected because in my religion I don't believe in blood transfusions, or I don't believe in transplanting of a heart. I think that you are letting people who, you know, they always say that it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. Well, I think you're letting yourself be influenced by those people. So I would like to see you be careful of those bills that take away women's rights. What are you going to do?
I agree 100%. Yay! But I will also tell you that 335 did not get a hearing in the Senate. People can introduce bills. Everybody is free in a democracy to introduce any bill they want to. Whether it moves or not is another story. And that particular bill did not move. It didn't get a hearing. It was assigned to a committee, and that was the end of it. It died in committee.
What about the other 12?
Pardon?
What about the other 12 bills?
I have no idea without bill numbers what I could tell you with bill numbers, but we can check on them and I can let you know. I can get back to you. I can tell you that some of these bills did pass. 2 of them did pass. I voted against both of them. But they want to regulate Planned Parenthood clinics and put more restrictions on them than they do on our regular clinics, and even more restrictions than they put on physicians in their office. And that's over in the House now, so we'll have to see what happens to them in the House. But I understand what you're saying, and I think that if men could get pregnant, this wouldn't even be an issue in general.
Just for what it's worth to you, the federal protections on privacy are part of the HIPAA law, the Health Insurance, I think it's Patient Portability Act or something like that. HIPAA is a pretty pervasive law. I mean, you'll find HIPAA notices in almost everything you do. Everybody's subject to HIPAA, and that protects patient privacy. And to the extent that Indiana would pass a law that is in contravention to HIPAA, HIPAA would preempt Indiana law on that. So whatever federal protections you're enjoying for privacy now, the state of Indiana cannot do away with that. Just so if it's you were saying you can't do a lot of things. Well, that will extend down to patient confidentiality, et cetera.
Good.
Thank you. And I think maybe what you're talking about, I like the way you phrase it. Some people call it the war on women. I like it the war on liberties for women. And I do appreciate it. Take your stand. Keep going. We're behind you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one last thing that Vanita Becker brought up in terms of the whoever it is that got more votes, and I suddenly can't remember, than the governor, because, thank you. I think that Indiana voters sent a message to you all when we voted for, even when many Republicans voted for Joe Connolly instead of Murdoch, who defeated Richard Lugar. So I guess I'm wanting you to make sure you take that into account. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you.
No, I hear this a lot, and I understand looking at votes and things like that. But man, we have 69 Republicans in the House of Representatives, and we have 2/3 in the Senate. We have the governorship. I wouldn't make too much out of that, really. How Indiana did.
At the same time, you had many Republicans who voted not for the Republican Richard Murdoch because of his views on trying to limit women's access, versus Connolly, who happens to be, by the way, he's a pro-life person, Connolly is.
Yeah, I think we're straying into debate here, and that's not the function of this meeting. So, thank you. A question now about the Rockport plant from John Blair, Indiana gasification, and 2 Senate bills.
Good morning. When I grew up in a conservative family, and conservatism was, to me, and defined to me as no government intervention or limited government intervention, low taxation, the state not imposing its will through taxation on the population, especially when it was only going to be limited benefits derived to a private company. With Indiana gasification, Leucadia, essentially the legislature imposed a tax on the people of Indiana that consume natural gas by saying that the state will compete with the private sector and in buying all this gas from this thing, regardless of the cost. The cost is projected, they say $6.60, but that's not the price. The price of this synth gas that's going to come out of this plant is going to be more like $10 a million BTU. That's minimum. And it's requiring a $4 billion federal loan guarantee. And the people are required to buy this gas by the state. They're required to buy this gas through some kind of crony capitalist business model that doesn't make any sense to me. It passed out of the Senate, this new bill passed out of the Senate the other day, 24 co-sponsors on the bill. And it was going to require that Leucadia true up every 3 years so that if they didn't achieve a profit, if it was a loss and the citizens had to pay more, that Leucadia would have to refund that money to them. What passed out at the direction of James Merritt, the utilities chairman in the Senate, who happens to be one of the people who will profit immensely from this facility through his connection with the Indiana Rail Corporation, what passed out was a nothing burger. Absolutely nothing. It's going to the House. We hope that you'll put these provisions that were in your bill, Suzanne, back in, because the consumer needs some help here. We don't need to be paying for 30 years for something that's not even needed, that's going to be a premium on our gas bills indefinitely. Thank you.
Well, that agreement from Leucadia was negotiated in 2006, John, before I was ever elected. I got thrown in the mix of that. Okay. I got thrown in the mix of that, and I was on that committee, and I think there was a lot of work being done to try to protect the ratepayers on this thing. Well, I'm just telling you now. I voted for that bill because it was going to pin ears back a little bit on Leucadia. That's a company out of New York, and I don't think they're very sympathetic to what the people in Indiana have to pay on utility bills. It's a company that's a long distance from here, and I don't think they're very concerned about what happens to our residents here in the state of Indiana, but I do. And I've seen this as one opportunity maybe to check this thing a little bit before it gets out of control. Now that was Bill 510, and the attempt here was to try to set up something that in case the courts rule that was not a viable contract, that we have something in place here in Indiana that would protect the citizens and renegotiate this agreement. And I think that that bill was that attempt to do that, and I think it is. And I think the people that voted on that bill, like myself, felt the same way. I know personally, my concern was on any of these measures on utilities, and I voted against a lot of the utility bills this go around, against my own party, because I'm concerned about these utility bills generally are driven by utility companies, not by the consumer. And so generally speaking, it's the consumer that's usually taking hits on these things. And so I think this bill was an opportunity that we would protect our consumers again. And, I know you like to comment when I don't vote according to what you think, but to make a hard vote, I don't hear from you at all. And I was a little disappointed, to be honest with you. I mean, it's easy to sit back on the sidelines and make statements, but when you're the guy sitting in that chair that makes that vote, it's a little bit different. But I'm going to tell all of you that my vote's up there, first and foremost, is how it affects our consumers. That comes ahead of everything else. And that's what I told Lucadia, and that's what I told Vectran when they was in my office, and that's what I told that whole room full of people that was in that room that day we took that vote in committee. I said, I'm looking at a lot of people here today that represents big utility companies. And I see utility companies here. But what I don't see here today is 6.5 million people that are out working, trying to make a living for themselves or trying to find a job. So it's my responsibility to see to it that whatever we do is going to be beneficial first and foremost to the consumer and the ratepayer. And so I want you to know that. So don't discount that bill too quickly, okay? That was an attempt, and it is a good first step. And it will allow now the IURC to have ability to step in and re-examine what the prices of natural gas might be and projected natural gas prices in the future. That wasn't there before. It is now with this bill.
Thank you.
Okay.
Pretty frustrating process. I suspect that if the bill in its original form had come before Senator Becker and Senator Thomas, they would have supported it. That would allow for a 3-year true-up. But that isn't what came before them. And that's the real disappointing part of this whole process. So we will try to improve it in the House, John, and hopefully at the end of the day, the ratepayers will be better protected than they are now. Kerwin Olson, who I know you know very well, he had the best quote at the end of the vote. He said, you know, everybody in the room wants to kill this turkey, but nobody wants to pull the trigger.
I want to speak on this too. And, this is my first term. And I have an engineering degree from Purdue, and I have a law degree. And I've been approached by both sides a lot. And I've talked, and I've talked, and I've talked, and I've listened, and I've read. I've got incredibly smart people telling me one thing, and incredibly smart people telling me another thing. I also know that we have lots and lots of coal in southern Indiana. And we have lots and lots of people who could use those jobs over in Rockport and in Spencer County if they build this $1 billion plus investment. It's going to hire a lot of people. A lot of people working these coal mines. Coal needs a place to go. I mean, we got to be absolutely sure that we get this right. If this isn't a good deal, then it's not a good deal. But we got to be absolutely sure, because a lot of people depend on stuff like this. And this is not a small thing. This is a big deal. But I'm telling you, I got smart people telling me two different things. And it all has to do with the future and the price of gas. Now, we could get into a lot of debate again about whether we should have ever gone down the path and offered this kind of a deal to somebody. But once you enter into a contract with a company, there's constitutional impairments in Indiana to going back and trying to alter that through legislation. So if the Supreme Court upholds it and says there is a contract, we're going to get sued. We're going to get sued for millions. And so I thought the Senate did a pretty good job of saying, hey, if the Supreme Court says it's a contract, then we gotta live with it, because actually that's what we'd have to do anyways. And if we don't, if it's not a contract, then they kick it over to the Utility Regulatory Commission. And just from what I can tell, I think they hopefully they got a better handle on it than I do, because I really do. And John, all due respect, I get it from both sides, and I get credible, decent information, and I don't know which end has got it right at the moment. So that's it.
And this is one of the things that Representative Washburn and I agree on 100%, because I think that what's happened is...
I need to rethink this.
It is a big deal. It's a big deal regarding jobs and the cost to those of us, the taxpayers. And there's another ingredient which hasn't been discussed, and I'm hoping that if it does go to the IURC, all those smart minds will pick it up. But that is all the byproducts that can be collected and sold in the process, and the ratepayer actually will be provided a split on the profits according to the contract. And there's nothing that's really being said about that, but there is There is the byproduct of carbon dioxide that's going to be piped and sold. There's a byproduct of sulfur. There is a company, $1 billion company, that's willing to start a processing plant down there. It's more jobs that will use one of the byproducts. This is part of this deal that we don't know about, and we need to know more. So if it goes to the IURC, maybe we should learn a lot more about it. But I agree, there are the smart minds on both sides that are saying we need to look into this more.
Okay. Moving on to public school safe zones for the LGBT community. A question from Jillian Cooper.
Hello, I'm Jillian Cooper. I'm a Master of Social Work student at USI. In colleges, it's common to have safe zones, such as marked classrooms or offices, that let students know that they're not going to be discriminated against due to their gender identity or sexual orientation. So my question for you is, what are your thoughts on providing safe zones in all public schools, elementary through high school?
All at once.
You know, one of the things that, again, I'm new at this thing, and one of the things that's been absolutely amazing to me is how often I feel like I ran for school board instead of state rep. Because I thought we had school boards and superintendents, and I'm just so tired of having to pretend like I'm the school board and make these kinds of things. And it's a good question. I mean, I don't mean to disparage your question at all, but that's why we have school boards, local superintendents, principals. I know of no impediment in Indiana law that would prohibit them from doing that. And if a school system wanted to do that, I don't know why they couldn't. And we got to get less of these decisions made in Indianapolis and more at the local level.
I would just echo Representative Washburn on this topic. I think, unfortunately, part of the school reforms that were championed a couple of years ago have almost eliminated any power of local school boards and have allowed the state to take more authority over public schools. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think our best decisions are local decisions made at the closest level to the people. And that means school boards. And I would just encourage you, I think he's right. There's nothing that prohibits or prevents a school from having safe zones. And I would encourage you just to take it up with the local school board or your principal or your teachers. That's really where it belongs. I did want to hit, since you taught up, since you mentioned safety, that we do have Senate Bill 1, which has passed the Senate, that does provide, it's a different topic, but it is safety. It provides state grant funding to help schools hire fully trained police officers for increased security if they want to. And it's a grant program, and schools will have to match part of the funding as well. So that's Senate Bill 1 that we have passed over to the House.
Want to join the school board? Okay. A question now about what Evansville citizens can do to ensure that same-sex marriage legislation passes. And Cindy has that question.
It's kind of fun. It's kind of like The Price is Right. I'm Cindy Nowell. I am in a master's program at the University of Southern Indiana as well. Despite what you may personally believe about same-sex marriage, the fact is that there is discrimination going on, and it is illegal to discriminate against couples based on sexual orientation. So what can we do as citizens of Evansville to help ensure that legislation passes for same-sex marriage?
All right.
I think the issue is there is no legislation for that at the moment. So maybe you can encourage one of these legislators to draft that. But at this point, there is nothing on the table, right?
saying, what do we do to help get it started? What's our best resource? What's the best way to do it?
The process. I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. The
It's a good admission, Gail.
The process would be to find a legislator who would have drafted a bill, and then gain support. And so it could be one of us. It could be anyone in the state of Indiana, whether it's a senator or a representative, and that would be the first step. And as far, I think we basically are commenting on the legislations before us, and I think maybe Representative, did you want to comment on this?
That's not the right question.
Okay.
No, did I want to? But I would. But I'm going to change because I'm going to use this a second here because I know I just reached over and gave Gail a tap and said, a nice admission of not knowing what's going on or whatever. And I got to tell you, Gail and I become friends. And I'll tell you why. Because we both attend on Thursday morning a Bible study in the House of Representatives. And this is no lame Bible study. This is a serious Bible study. It meets in the governor's office on Thursday mornings at 7:30. And both Gail and I have seen other sides of each other than we ever would have dreamed. And as I've mentioned before, it just always amazes me. It's one of the wonders of life that people can rationally, intelligently disagree. And I've really had a pleasure getting to know Gail. And yeah, we do, we don't agree on some things, but we really are friends. And it's a good-natured ribbing that goes on between us. And I just want to make that clear to people who are watching that don't get the wrong idea about it. We disagree on a lot of policy, but we're becoming friends.
Well, your question was, what can you do to get a bill started to promote same-sex marriage? Well, maybe the question ought to be, what do we do to protect the sanctity of marriage as it is defined today? I'm not trying to be mean about this. I'm just saying that, as adults here, what we do for our children, they're going to have to recognize what we're trying to explain to them as they grow up. And we're trying to set in place certain principles that will always help them to be able to make decisions, what's good and bad, right and wrong, things as they grow up to become adults too. And we have this this marriage of man and woman. We've had it forever in our society, and it's now on the hit list to be watered down or kind of shredded, and I don't understand why we do that. If people choose to live a lifestyle of their own, there's nothing prohibits them from doing that. I don't know why we would have to have a law that would mandate this is the lifestyle they're allowed to have, and we're going to set up rules and guidelines for that. People in this country are free to live their own lives the way they want, but I don't know why we would want to, in the process of allowing people that liberty and freedom, to deprive other people of their beliefs are. And I think that's what we would be doing in something like that. And I just want to share with you that I don't mean to be offensive, and I hope it's not taken that way. It's just that some people prefer to man and woman be married and raise their families, and that's their lifestyle, and it's been that way. If others choose different lifestyles, they're quite welcome to do that. But to require the government to step in and push for that type of path, I don't know if that's the proper method to take. I just don't. I just want to share that with you for what it's worth, okay?
Moving on to a question about a House bill on physical therapy from Mary Bennett.
Good morning. First, I want to thank very much all the state representatives here who voted yes for 1034, the physical therapy legislation. I think I've been involved for probably 25 years. It's never come through the House without any unfriendly amendments before, and I really want to thank you. I know in the Senate, There is a hearing in the Health Committee on Wednesday. Senator Becker has agreed to go on the bill and pass it through. And I just want to I know that Senator Thomas has said he will support the bill, and I just really want to thank you for your support and just prevent any unfriendly amendments going on, especially at second reading. I think that there could be some amendments that we've agreed upon. It was amended in the House. And I especially want to thank Representative Crouch and Representative Bacon, who isn't here, I know, for their help in getting it through the House Health Committee. We did agree that spinal manipulation and wound debridement would only be done on a referral from the physician the way they are now, but that we would have the 30 days for every other diagnosis without the physician referral, which I think will help because many patients come for just a very short time, and I think that will help with costs. So thank you for your support, and looking forward to hopefully it can get through the Senate.
For the audience, Mary Bennett is an example of someone who can make a difference. She has lobbied this Southwest delegation for as long as I've been in the legislature. That's been about 7 years, 8 years. Mm-hmm. And she has been very reasonable, very factual, but has stayed with it and keeps educating and educating. And as a result of her efforts, you had unanimous support from Southwest Indiana. And because of your efforts and the efforts of other physical therapists across the state, you were able to get the job done. And I was sure to let my physical therapist know when I went 2 weeks ago that I did vote for the bill. Probably a good idea. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have two questions on, I'm not sure, I assume this is Senate bill, but I'm not sure, on health. And we'll take the one from Mary Ellen Van Dyke.
My name is Mary Ellen Van Dyke, and I'm here to talk about Senate Bill 489 and 371. And I would like to thank Senator Jim Toms for his support of these two bills. They did pass the Senate. Senator Becker referenced these bills earlier in the conference this morning. And I would like to ask Senator Becker why you don't think that Planned Parenthood should be held to the same medical standards that other abortion clinics.
Well, first of all,
Mary Ellen.
Senate Bill 371 doesn't hold doctors' offices to the same requirements as abortion clinics. We are talking in this
Senator, that's because doctors' offices' main business is not abortion.
Neither is Planned Parenthood.
I agree. I disagree
Neither
with
is
you.
Planned Parenthood.
I disagree with you.
Well, we're not going to agree. So let me just say this. If you look at what Planned Parenthood does on a statewide basis, their predominant 95% of services by Planned Parenthood is reproductive health. It's cervical cancer screenings for low-income women. It's birth control to prevent unintended pregnancies. That is the majority of what their business is. Now, you can disagree with me all you want to. That's your prerogative. But I don't think that we should be passing bills that do not require the same standards of medical, of even hospitals or doctor's offices. This is all about a chemical RU-486. That's what this is about. There is one clinic in Lafayette, Indiana, that does prescribe under a doctor's care RU-486. And what this bill does, 371, is it now says that that clinic has to have all the same standards as if it performed surgical abortions. It does not perform surgical abortions. Doctor's offices, also a physician has to prescribe this. A physician with Planned Parenthood has to prescribe this. They only have licensed nurses and licensed physicians that care for their patients. Now, let me also tell you that the bill is new in that it's only directed at this particular clinic. I personally just don't think that the legislature needs to be dictating medicine between a physician and the physician's patient. And that's what this bill attempts to do. And it is just not necessary to add further. Let me also tell you that without the bill, a woman that wants to get RU 486 currently, right now, can go to the internet and order it. Anybody can order it off the internet without a physician's prescription, without any follow-up by a physician. Currently, there is follow-up with a physician, just like there would be in a physician's office, but they're trying to put additional standards to discourage women from taking RU 486. I personally just don't think government ought to be involved in those personal medical decisions for women or men. And as I said before, if this were an issue where it affected physical health of men, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
With all due respect, Senator Becker, that comment that you just made, how can you, you supported a bill, in fact, you sponsored a bill for breast care for women who have dense breasts to have an ultrasound. You just said government should not be involved in a woman's decision or involved in women's health. Well, you've sponsored a bill for that.
That's a little different because it's insurance coverage, Mary. And what it is it's a bill that Senator Miller sponsored that I agreed to go on that says that if you get a mammogram, right now there is not automatic coverage if you get a mammogram and your doctor thinks that you have dense breast tissue. It's very difficult if you have dense breast tissue to pick up cancer in lumps. And so a lot of times in fact, the St. Mary's Breast Center, they will do it automatically if you end up with dense breast tissue and there's a question about whether or not you have cancer. They will automatically require a ultrasound on your breast so that they can make sure that you don't have cancer. And that's what this bill does. It requires insurance companies to provide that coverage. That's the difference, big difference.
Well, for the record, 98% of women who go to Planned Parenthood and are pregnant.
We're not trying to have a debate here. I think you've stated your question, and now we're going to hear from the legislator.
Thank you very much. I just ask for the same consideration that you gave the lady in the blue sweater. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'm not real familiar with the bill. The state of Indiana cannot overturn the right of a woman to have an abortion. That is a federal court. The Supreme Court made that decision. But we as a state have the right to regulate how those are given and to regulate the conditions. And that is what this bill attempts to do. And, you know, I'm looking forward to the debate and certainly support life of the unborn. Thank you.
This is coming out of the Senate, so we haven't had a good chance to look at it in detail. But from what I understand today, RU 486 is a very dangerous drug. It really is. And if it wasn't involved in the premature termination of pregnancies, its regulation would not be an issue at all. It's because it tangentially involves abortion that it's not regulated. And we have to look at it outside the abortion context and look at it in the context of, is it a dangerous drug, and does there need to be some protections in there for women? And that's what I understand today as it's coming over from the Senate, that RU 486 is a very dangerous drug, and it is deeply concerning to me if you can purchase that on the internet. That's very scary stuff. If taken wrongly during a tubal pregnancy, it will kill you. I mean, it's very, very dangerous. This isn't what I call it, a day after pill or whatever. This is a different deal. This is a different deal, and it's a very dangerous drug.
Let me also add, that's why it's important that this drug be given through a physician, so that the physician has the health care of that patient in mind. And that's current law.
Well, I just want to say too, I know there's a couple bills, and I see bills occasionally on different matters too that sort of tiptoe around the edge of what the heart of the matter might be, and maybe this is one of them. I just want you to know that, when I vote for a measure, I would never vote against anybody's health condition, whether it's a woman or a man or a young child. No, I don't think anybody up here would ever do that. But maybe the question is trying to, maybe eke out where a legislator stands on an issue, and maybe the abortion issue is what she's driving at here with this. I don't know, but when I, as a legislator, I know that I am concerned about all of our citizens in this state. And when we're in a world today of we're always about for the children, we've certainly got to keep in mind the little babies and who's going to speak for them, especially those that are yet to be born, and that there's somebody's going to speak out for them, on their behalf. So I want you to know on these measures like that, a vote, don't necessarily take that vote as a vote against a woman's right or health, but we also have to keep in mind and for first and foremost the life of everybody, including those little babies. And so that's why I support bills that will always do that. So just want to share that with you. I think you have a right to know.
I don't want to leave Senator Becker out there alone. She's truly a valiant person when it comes to women's issues and liberties and equal treatment, and I do support her position. I just want you to know that.
Those that know me know that I don't speak very out really ever about social issues, and there's a reason for that. One, it's a very emotional issue for me. If anybody has ever struggled in their lifetime to have children, which I have, I've had miscarriages, I really struggle to think why any human being on this earth would want to take the life of something that was given to them. When there are people like me who struggle out there in their lives just to be able to bring one in this world. To be able to take a pill and remove a life, in my opinion, is a tragedy. And to Tom's point, we just passed a bill through our House committee about synthetic drugs. We're trying to remove synthetic drugs because of the harmful effects to our children. I know it doesn't compare to that. I don't know much about these bills yet. But if you had asked me, before I ran for office, how I felt about Planned Parenthood, and if you ask any of those pro-life folks out there, they would have said, well, on her survey, she supported them. But as I've come to learn more about them, their tactics, the things that they do, I don't support any federal funding, any state funding, any funding going towards abortions that go through Planned Parenthood. But when people talk about issues like these, it's something that gets to my heart, and gets to my heart immediately, because I know how precious life is, and unfortunately from a perspective in which I can't, So for those folks that are out there that are willing to take a life, it just confounds me.
Okay, question about the 10% income tax cut. And Robert, I'm not sure I can read your last name here, so Robert, yes.
My name is Robert Goff. I'm been here in Evansville for quite a while, and I think Evansville is a very beautiful town. I would like to suggest to our representatives and the senators here that they look to provide money for roads and the school and not for a tax cut. But again, I just simply want to recommend that they provide money for roads and schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Here I'll lighten the load a little bit. One of the main things that I wanted to do when I got to the State House was be on the Roads and Transportation Committee, because I sincerely felt that there was serious neglect of Southern Indiana as far as our infrastructure is concerned. I wish Representative Crouch didn't have to leave because she's on the budget more than anybody, but just real quick numbers for you. This budget that we have currently proposed adds an additional $250 million per year in sustainable funding for bridges and infrastructure in the state of Indiana. And then for education, any cuts that have been done, the number 300 million has been been thrown around as cuts to education. That has been restored, and an additional $454 million will be provided in what I like to call K to college, and including education for preschool all the way on up. So I am certainly a supporter of all of these reforms. If in April we get a good budget, then I would maybe entertain a tax cut. But at this time, our budget's very solid, and it addresses exactly what your concerns are.
You know, I think it might be worth explaining a little bit about the budget process in the House and the way it was gone about. The first thing that was decided was we had to maintain our reserves at about 12.5% to cover the historical fluctuations in revenue. We don't want to end up like Illinois where you're going into the red. We don't want to be in a position again where we have to have our governor unilaterally make some really courageous cuts to all government services to keep Indiana in the black. We don't want to be in that situation again. So you set aside about $2 billion to handle that rainy day fund for the times that with the ineptitude in Washington, D.C. that we may have coming. Then there was a recognition that we're in a state of recovery. You know, there never was a real policy decision to cut the schools by $300 million a year or so. That was a reflection of the times. I mean, we can look in hindsight and say, was it absolutely necessary? Maybe we could have swung it and made it. Maybe not. No one knew at the time. They did their best to keep Indiana in the black. They did across-the-board cuts because schools are a big chunk of our budget. They took a hit. So the idea was, let's get them back to at least 2009 levels before the downturn. So that's where the 300 million plus figure comes from. There's a growing recognition that our infrastructure needs are there, and because of volume-based gas taxes and different things, we have an issue of funding roads properly that's going to continue to grow. So there's an idea to shift some of the sales tax from gas into the highway for the first time and to be used in road construction. That did amount to about $250 million. And when we were done with that, there was a speed up of the inheritance tax because that's already been passed. And the $500 million it would take to do an income tax cut is questionable whether you could do that. Now, what Representative McNamara said is very true. We're going to have a revenue forecast in April. It might be possible to jimmy around some of the things in the budget and with some additional revenue, still pull that off and still maintain all these other things. But we have to be cognizant in the state that we're in a recovery. It's not the kind of budget that I would write normally as a conservative, but it is a good recovery budget for Indiana, and it's going to try to get things going again here where we've been. And I think that Dr. Brown in the House, who on Ways and Means did a good job with it. I just hope the Senate doesn't mess it up.
Maybe someone from the Senate should weigh in here.
Well, we'll try not to mess it up too bad. Usually the Senate has to correct the House's mistakes in most cases. But I do think it's a good budget. And one of the things I'd like to ask everybody here, is there anyone here that has been on the new I-69? Yay! Well, if you haven't, it's now only a 2-hour drive to Bloomington. And it certainly makes the trip to Indianapolis a whole lot easier, but it's still not done. Right now there's 32 miles to Bloomington that you can either go on 45, which is what I usually take, or you can take 231 to 67 or 231 to 70, but that takes you pretty far west out of your way. But it is still under construction. I-69 will be finished to State Road 37 by the end of next year. Think about that. I mean, this is something that we in Southwest Indiana have been working on, begging for from state officials for the last 40 years, if not more. And we will be able to drive to 37 by the end of next year. But there is still that whole section of 37 then to Indianapolis, which is about 50 miles. And that's going to cost over $700 million to finish that. So we do not have a real cushion when it comes to transportation funds. I think the House has definitely improved it with the $250 million. But think about that. We still have, just for one highway project to finish that, in addition to that road, it's going to cost another $1 billion for the bridge over to Kentucky. Now that will be a collaborative agreement between Kentucky and Indiana, so we won't have all the expense. But when you think about one project and the cost, we still, in Indiana, we're considered the crossroads of America. It's critical that we have good infrastructure if we're going to continue to attract jobs and growth to our state. And so I think that those areas, education, I'm glad to see that the House budget is restoring the cuts that were made to education, but that just now gets schools not back even to 2009 with all the additional requirements that we've also put on them. So I think we still have, and we don't know what the economy is going to do. We have to be very cautious with state revenue. We don't want to get in the position of Illinois, where companies are leaving Illinois because of their tax structure. And we have a good tax structure. We have cut corporate gross income tax. We have eliminated inventory tax, and we are phasing out the inheritance tax. And we have some of the lowest property taxes in the country.
Just a comment regarding the 10%. If we do in fact have this opportunity in April that we can award something that's better than where we are in the tax structure, I would just hope that it applies to the middle class. There are 3 things that are being discussed, at least that I remember, and that is accelerating the phase out of the inheritance tax. I don't know that necessarily benefits the middle class. And there are also some ideas for corporate tax benefits to the corporations, and I'm not sure that is what I think is where we ought to go. I believe that the middle class is the generators right now, and they're the ones who are buying and spending, and we need to really reinforce the middle class. So I'm going to look at that when it comes around to April, when we do get our budget forecast in.
Okay. We might actually do something phenomenal here, which is get through all the questions. It'd be a first, I think, at least as far as my time here. So we have 3 left. The next one is about tuition for illegal or undocumented immigrants, and that's Rob Cornoyer.
I'm Rob Knoyer. I'm from Gibson County. My question is, let's back up. Senate Bill 207 will give illegal aliens a break on their college tuition. And my question would be, why would we encourage illegal behavior in our state? If we don't want to become Illinois, this is going to, if you pass this one, this is sure to bring us down. I don't understand why anybody would encourage this kind of break. I've got a son in college. He's working his own way, but he's natural born here. I know I have friends that came from other countries. They all come in through the front door, and it took them about 7 years to do it. And they're working hard, and they raised their families, and they did everything right. This bill passed out of the Senate 35 to 15, and it's already had its first reading in the House. So with that, I'll wait for some answers.
Does it prohibit or does it support?
It will give illegals residing in this state, it will give them a break on their tuition, if passed. Senator Becker, not to pick on you, but I see you voted for it.
I did.
Can you explain why?
Yeah, because these are students that were already here in our universities.
Are they illegal here?
No, they're not.
They're not illegal.
Mm-mm. Let me just read it to you. It says resident tuition rate and other this was Senator Jean Lysing's bill, and Jean Lysing is a farmer.
Okay.
And she carried the bill basically, and actually even Carlin Yoder, who is also a very conservative person in the Senate, supported the bill and actually spoke on behalf of the bill, because he said these are students that were already getting this tuition in the state of Indiana, and there was a ruling that they could no longer receive it. And so what they decided was that they were going to offer this opportunity because these kids were already here.
Well, I would encourage the members in the House, when it comes across your laptop or whatever happens up there, that you shoot it down right in the foot and shove it in the shredder. We don't want this kind of behavior. I mean, this is illegal we're talking about.
Yes, it's illegal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, there's always the careful distinction to be made between, illegal immigration and legal immigration. And to the extent that a bill like this would further illegal immigration, I certainly could not support it. I know far too many people who want to come into this country legally and are waiting in line, going through the proper channels, and I can't support it. I know there's some tragic situations of people who've been here for a long time, but I just can't go there myself. And we'll take a look at it and see what we can do. But it makes no sense to me.
Well, I was just flipping through the bill. I'm going to have to read the bill a little bit more. The only thing I could find to reiterate her point was that before 2011, if they were already enrolled in the university. But I do reside on the side that legal immigration is the way people should enter this country. And I'll be looking at this bill and considering it for what it has on it. I would have some questions do these people still receive the same scholarships that our other residents in Indiana are applying for or trying to get or whatever that might be? So there'd be a lot of questions. Is there competition that our kids are losing out on in Indiana as a result of it? So I don't know if you've had those debates or not, but those would be my first questions that would come to mind on it.
I think Senator Cobbs can offer some clarification.
Yeah, it was Senator Lysing's bill, and what it done was it would allow these aliens to have in-state tuition prices for their college tuition, and that was the crux of the bill, rather than out-of-state tuition charges. And now I did vote against it because one of the concerns I have is that we do tend to offer assistance to people who are here illegally, and this is some of the things we deal with. It stated in my bill that I was addressing the illegals that are in this country filing fraudulent tax returns, and there's elements in our country right now that are here illegally, and then we have other people who come here and go through the process to become citizens, and they don't get that kind of treatment. They don't get the free rollout that we provide for people who are breaking the laws and come here illegally. And I say that because Oh, my wife and I, we've got a daughter-in-law who came here from Mexico. I think she came here in 2003. She went through the program to become a citizen, 5 years to become a United States citizen. And she's worked for herself, she's provided for herself, she's done everything that was required of her to be a citizen. And I know when she took that oath of citizenship along with all the other people on that day, how proud they were to be an American citizen. And how proud we should all be of those people. I'm not going to diminish all of the work that those individuals have went through to be an American citizen by granting amnesty or programs to people who violate our national laws. And we all should take that approach. I mean, if you want to be a citizen of this country and you are willing to do by the rules and the regulations, then we welcome that. But not to promote and sanctify illegal entry into this country in manners like this here. So that's something I want to state to everybody here.
I would say that to really stop this bill, it shouldn't get a hearing. And the only way that it wouldn't get a hearing is if the chair of the committee decided they didn't want to do that. So I would suggest that you write your legislators and ask them as soon as we know. I don't know that it's been assigned yet. I don't know. I don't have my papers with me. But we will know that. And as soon as it's assigned, ask them to get your comments to the chair of that committee.
Tom, you're my legislator. Put your foot down up there.
Okay, question now from Brenda Bergertz about drugs.
Thank you all very much. Some of y'all probably were here in January. And if you were, you remember me up here talking about my grandson, Jeremy. He's still in jail, praise God. I'm the grandmother. He lived with us. He's doing better. He goes to court the end of this month. But the Indiana Dream Team, Christy Risk, introduced me to this Eric Lashbrook, the director and minister, is up at Gosport, Indiana. He came down last Sunday and went to court Monday morning. He didn't get to talk or anything. It was between Jeremy's attorney and the assistant prosecuting attorney. They're going to meet this week and talk some things. I don't know what's going to happen when they go to court the 29th. I'm praying to God that they will go along with Jeremy getting to go to the Indiana Dream Team. It's a 3-year program. But the reason I'm talking about drugs again is, again, we as moms, dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, we have got to get off our rear ends and get involved in our community. A couple weeks ago, I talked to Nick Herman and for about 40 minutes. And I know I've been seeing infomercials about like Holly's House, like women that have been abused and that, and the programs that are out there for them. And that's awesome. It is great. But we've also, I told him, I said, think about this and pray about it. You're our prosecuting attorney, and I think it would be a great thing to do, say down at CK Newsom Center and announce on TV or whatever, to get the community involved, have a meeting and see if people will come and get involved. And I just want to thank y'all too for everything that y'all are doing.
I appreciate your wanting to put an emphasis on people getting involved. Every problem we face as a country, and particularly in education, I think is really stemming from a cultural rot that we have. And we're asking our educators to put together some things that are broken. And I don't know if they can put it back together again. I really do think it's gonna have to take a real effort of people to, as parents, step up to the plate, and as churches and as organizations, and to step up and help those parents, because it's this pervasive degradation of our culture that is contributing to most of the issues we're facing. So thanks for all your efforts to bring attention to that.
Thank you. And last week, Mr. Lashbrook said there was a Senator Foley, I believe is his name, or something like that. He's involved with his team too. So, but thank you all very much.
Okay, we can make history here and have our last piece of paper, a question about high-tech jobs and employment in that sector from Tony Beamer.
Different role this time. A couple of months ago, there was a series of articles that the Courier ran about the recovery and the kind of jobs that came back from the recovery. And it was real disappointing to see the large number of what they call low-paying jobs, very few middle income, a little bit better on the high income. And I guess my question is kind of two-part. It looks like manufacturing as we have known it is probably history. That the kind of jobs that are going to be around in 2020, 2030 are going to be technology related. And I guess my question is, I know that it is hard in the legislature because you're kind of dealing a year or two at a time, but is there anything going on or anybody studying what we really need to do for 15, 20 years down the road? Because I've heard that people that are freshmen in college right now, the job they may have upon graduation may not be invented yet. So I feel like we've got this vacuum now with all these jobs that have gone away. What are we going to do to replace it down the road?
Sure. There's a lot of legislation regarding jobs and job development and economic development. House Bill 1002 is what we call the Skills Gap bill, authored by our Speaker, Bosma, and co-authored, PLAS on it as well, right? And then I believe the author on the Senate side is Senator Long and Senator Lannon. This bill is directed at creating exactly what you're asking for, a career and technical council to look at across the state of Indiana, where our gaps and opportunities might be in the state of Indiana as far as education is concerned. Not just education for students in K-12 right now, but for adults as well. And you know, I can fumble with the statistics a little, but at any given time in an Evansville area, you can find 200 jobs that are waiting for skilled workers that we don't have the skills for. I heard a more staggering number up around the Terre Haute area, it's about 700. So at any given time, there are the jobs that are good paying jobs that are out there, but the education piece of having them trained to be in that skilled job isn't there. And so the long-term look at it is taking place with House Bill 1002, but there are a lot of other education bills. I'm on a bill 1005, which will help actually get kids into those career and technical fields that we're talking about, get them college ready, and look at ways that we can not only help those folks right now who are adults who are in that particular, but create a pipeline for folks that in the future, that we're not wondering 10, 20 years down the line, are we going to have the skilled and qualified workers that we need to keep us competitive?
Yeah.
Terry? It's Terry. Tony, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was one of the things I was happy, like I said, when Governor Pence was doing his inauguration speech about opening up avenues to training for careers like skills like that. And I know, I was glad to hear him talk about that because that's a market that we can go after right now. I know Toyota and Berry Plastics are looking for people that has the training to work in the along the assembly lines and in those facilities to do those kind of jobs. And I think we've lost emphasis on that over the years. And now it's back, and we have these career schools around here. And there's a lot of trade schools that for electrical workers and plumbers and pipe fitters and those kind of jobs. And I'm seeing now a trend, a focus on looking at trying to bolster that kind of employment and training for people in those levels of employment. I think too that again, there's a lot of small industry out here, that small businesses that are looking for people with qualifications to do, garages that does automotive work, Today, it takes a special skill to work on cars today. It's not like it was 50 years ago. Today, you've got to have the technology and the equipment to diagnose and repair vehicles like that. So another thing, too, I go back to is that I'd like to see us in Indiana make sure that we review what we're doing here with regards to regulations on small businesses and entrepreneurs who want to start a business, that we're not handicapping them before they even get off the ground with so much of red tape that is involved with getting a business started. There's a lot of people that I've met that want to start a business or are in the process of starting a business, but they tell me of the struggles they face by having these permits and these licenses. I understand there's some level of, control, if you want to call it that, but if it's overbearing, if it suffocates this entrepreneur before he can even get started, then we got to recognize that we're too restrictive, and I think we're doing that nationwide too as well. But statewide, I'd like to see us review that to help promote this kind of a small business and the trades and the jobs that you're talking about.
We're just about out of time here, but Senator Becker, if you want a brief last word.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that a companion bill to House Bill 1002 is Senate Bill 465, which deals with regional work councils and really focuses on community development and looking at the skills that young people need to graduate from high school with certifications or early college, as Representative McNamara indicated. So we do have several bills on this topic, and I am very appreciative of the governor's initiative on vocational and technical education, because it is the Chamber of Commerce statewide says that there's about 930,000 people in the state of Indiana that do not have the skills that are necessary in some of these jobs, and so we need to do a better job. And really, we should look to the building trades and all the kinds of programs that they have for getting people in apprenticeship programs and get them the kind of training that they can do these jobs. So just wanted to share that with you as well.
And I think we will have to leave it there as it is 11 o'clock. But thank you all for your time, your questions, and your civic involvement. And thank you to the legislators.